It is time to power rank the best position groups on Notre Dame's roster. Could the running backs break out and take the top spot? And will the wide receiver room finally take their game to the next level? That's all coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Tuesday, May 21st, and thank you for getting your Tuesday started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And as a reminder, you can watch the full episode as well as every other episode on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. For those of you watching along on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. And for all the podcast listeners out there, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe if you have not already. It's good to be back. I apologize for not being as active in the month of May. The everyday listeners know that I was on vacation for about a week and a half. Then just a few days after I got back, I got really sick and could not talk without coughing every few seconds, which makes podcasting a little bit difficult. But I'm here. I'm feeling a lot better, and I'm ready for a great week of shows. As for today, as I said in the open, I'm going to power rank the position groups on the Notre Dame roster from best to worst. Pretty simple. Right now, I broke it down into 9 position groups. I did quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight end. Offensive line is one whole unit. Defensive line is another whole unit. Linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties. I could have messed around with this a little bit and done like interior offensive line, tackles, interior defensive line, defensive ends, but I'm just going to stick with these 9. And when I made these rankings, what I really was prioritizing was the starters and the quality of the guys who are going to be on the field the majority of the time, but also depth is a very important factor as well. So let's get to what I believe is the best position group on Notre Dame's roster, and I don't think it's going to come as much of a surprise. I'm taking the defensive line. I know what I'm getting with Notre Dame's defensive line. And what I'm getting is 2 guys, specifically on the interior, who would be on NFL rosters this year if they decided to declare for the NFL draft instead of opting to come back for their graduate year. And I'm referring to Riley Mills and Howard Cross. They make up what I believe is the best tandem of defensive tackles in the entire country. Those are 2 grown-ass men, and they are going to be accompanied by 2 other grown-ass men on the edges. In R.J. Oben, the Duke transfer, was a great pickup by Notre Dame, can really get after the passer, so it's really good to have him. And then you've got Jordan Botelho, who, you know, at this time last year, we were talking about Jordan Botelho as, one of the potential breakout players for Notre Dame last season. And even though he didn't take his game to that level, still, when you have a guy like him who's been around for such a long time, is a menace on the outside, like that's a really good player to have. And beyond those guys, if you look at who's behind them, there's some young players who look poised to break out. Boubacar Traore at the Viper is one of those guys, Josh Burnham. And then plus you've got veteran guys like Jason Onye and hopefully Gabriel Rubio, who we all assume will be back with the team starting this summer. They provide really quality depth on the interior behind the starters. So you've got young guys who could break out. You've got veterans who've been around for a long time, and they could come in and contribute right away because defensive line is a position where you have to rotate a lot of guys throughout the game. And I think Notre Dame has a college football playoff caliber starting unit, and they have college football playoff caliber role players as well behind them. And I think that makes them the clear front runner or the clear best position group on the entire roster. And that's a great thing because in order to win at the highest level of college football, you really have to have a great defensive line. It's why Michigan was able to win the national championship last year. They had a great offensive line and a spectacular defensive line. So Notre Dame is going to lean heavily on their defensive line this year, and that's a good thing because they've got veteran guys who are extremely talented to do that, and I'm really excited about what that group can accomplish this season. Okay, at number 2, I'm going to keep it on the defense, and I'm going to put the cornerbacks. I had them neck and neck with my number 3 position, but the reason that I have them at number 2 is because a healthy Benjamin Morrison is probably the best player on the entire team, or at least will be in 2024, which is kind of funny to say because Xavier Watts is also in the defensive backfield, and he won the Bronco Nagurski Award last year for the top defensive player in college football, and I don't even think he's the best player on that side of the ball. Benjamin Morrison is still recovering from his shoulder surgery that he had during spring practice, but it seems like he's going to be back ready to go for the start of the season. And I'm really, really excited about what he can do for the Irish this year. I think he's really going to take his game to a whole nother level and solidify himself as a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. Now, opposite Benjamin Morrison as the field corner, I'm extremely high on Christian Gray, and I believe that he will ultimately be named the starter next to Morrison. But I also think that Jaden Mickey is a really, really solid third cornerback. At nickel, which I'm including in this position group, Jordan Clark has impressed everyone at the nickel position in his first few months on campus. I know that last year he struggled a bit when he was with Arizona State, but it seems like he was playing through an injury throughout the season, and that really hampered his level of play, but now he's healthy and ready to go. And that gives you 3 really quality starters at cornerback for Notre Dame, because nickelback is essentially a starter on this Notre Dame-based defense now. So when you have a guy like Morrison, who's a proven star, Christian Gray, who's an up-and-coming guy, and then Jordan Clark, a veteran at the nickel spot, that's a really good unit. The reason that I have a little bit of concern about the cornerback room has to do with the fact that Clarence Lewis and Micah Bell transferred. If they had stuck around, I would have no concerns at all about the depth of this room, and they'd have a real shot at being first. But without them, I think Notre Dame is about an injury away from being in serious trouble at the cornerback position. Obviously, if Benjamin Morrison gets hurt, the defense is going to take a step back because he is that talented. But, if Gray gets hurt and Mickey gets hurt, one of those guys isn't able to come in, you're pretty thin at the position behind him. And I have a little bit of a concern there. I was hoping that Notre Dame would take a defensive back, specifically a corner in the transfer portal. It seems like they looked really hard to find one, but there weren't really that many great options in the spring portal window, so they opted not to add a guy just for the sake of adding one. So I still feel really good about this quarterback room. Obviously, that's the reason why I have them number 2. But the lack of depth, or maybe perceived lack of depth, is why I have them at number 2 and not at number 1. Okay, at number 3. I've got the running backs. Now, this might come as a surprise considering the fact that Notre Dame lost Wojciak Estime to the NFL, and Estime was a terrific college running back. But as I said a couple times before on this show, I actually expect Notre Dame to get a little bit more production out of its running back room this year than they did last year, because the room as a whole is just so talented. It's kind of funny to think back about and think about what Dylan McCullough, the running backs coach, had to say. I think it was going into fall camp, or maybe it was during fall camp, when he said that he had a 5-headed monster in his running back room, when in reality it was just one monster and Wojciak Estime and a bunch of guys who had minimal roles. But Dylan McCullough still liked to rotate them a lot. This year, I actually think that the Notre Dame running back room has a legit 2-headed monster in Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. And some of that, admittedly, is projection, because Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love have not played a ton in their college careers. This is Jadarian Price's 3rd year with Notre Dame, but he missed his entire freshman year due to a torn Achilles injury. Jeremiah Love flashed in moments last year, specifically in that Ohio State game. So even though he doesn't have a ton of carries under his belt, there's plenty of reasons to be excited about what he could do once he starts getting carries on a regular basis. So you've got 2 guys who can do a bunch of different things. Jeremiah Love has been cross-training a little bit at wide receiver, so I think he's going to be a big threat out of the backfield catching passes. They might actually line him up on the outside and try to get him in a mismatch, and then he can come around on a jet sweep or something like that. So there's a bunch of really exciting things that Mike Denbrock can do with these 2 guys, but it's not just them. Jabron Payne, he's a veteran. He's solid in his role as a short down back. He's also probably the best pass blocker of any running back in the room, which, as we know, is extremely important. And if you can't protect the quarterback when you're a running back there, you're really not going to play. So Jabron Payne is important. Also, Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams, the true freshmen, they are so talented. I think that they're going to force their way onto the field a little bit this season. Again, it's going to be mostly Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, but Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams, they both bring a bunch of different things to the table. Kedron Young looks like a slightly smaller Wojciak Estime. He was a little bit limited in spring practice while he was dealing with an injury, but Aeneas Williams flashed. He looked good in the spring game. I'm really excited to see what he can do. So you've got 2 what I believe will be really, really good starters in Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. And when the young guys need to come in, provide fresh legs, and get those 2 main guys a break, I have a lot of confidence that Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams are going to be able to make the most of it in their freshman season. So feel really good about the running backs. Honestly, I've heard from some people that they might be the most talented group on the entire team. I like that. I'm very excited about that, but I think the lack of experience is what's gonna hold them back slightly, and that is why I have them as the third best position group on this Notre Dame football team. All right, coming up next is the Notre Dame quarterback room led by Riley Leonard, good enough to beat out All-American Xavier Watts, Rod Hurd, and the young safeties behind him. It's coming right up. Today's episode is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. So when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Speaking from my own experience, I know that whenever we're looking to make a new hire, we use LinkedIn to help find the perfect new team member, and it's so easy because they do the heavy lifting. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why owners rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, coming in at number 4, I've got the quarterbacks. Now, I was torn on this one because they have an extremely deep room with Riley Leonard, the transfer from Duke, Steve Angeli, who's going into his third year, Kenny Minchey, and CJ Carr. There is a ton of talent in that room, more than there's been in the Notre Dame quarterback room in a very long time. It's one of the deepest positions on the roster. If you look at the last guy in there and how talented he is, I think right now CJ Carr is still 4th string. He's not going to be 4th string for long, but still, we saw what he could do in spring practice, and there are plenty of reasons to be excited about his future. But he's still a true freshman. He is not ready to lead this team and lead this offense in his freshman season. Next year, different story. But let's focus on Riley Leonard and Steve Angeli because they are going to be the primary guys who are vying for the top spot this year at the quarterback position. Now, we all assume that Riley Leonard is going to be the starter from day one. That's going to be the case. But Riley Leonard has been dealing with some injuries. He's already had 2 surgeries since he arrived on campus at Notre Dame. He was sidelined for the entire second half of last season because of an injury he suffered on the last play against Notre Dame. And for a quarterback that's going to be running the ball a lot, ankle injuries aren't really that great. They don't give you a ton of confidence about his health and his ability to stay on the field throughout the season. Now, I will say Riley Leonard is obviously extremely talented. He's an elite athlete. He can run. He's got a cannon of an arm. Accuracy has been an issue, but the best case for Riley Leonard could vault this group to number 1. But I think the worst case of Riley Leonard, which would basically be him getting hurt and basically missing the entire season, that could put this room at the bottom in 2024, and that has to do with the fact that Steve Angeli would then be the starter, and he only has 1 start under his belt. He looked really good in that Sun Bowl game. He did everything that Notre Dame asked him to do. But is he ready to take this team to the college football playoff and, win a couple of games in the playoff and achieve all their goals for this season? I'm not ready to believe that just yet. So that's why I struggled so much with the quarterback position, because I feel like, at the top end, it could be really, really good. But then there's, a bunch of different concerns this year. Now, if we're looking at like the future and what position is positioned the best for the future, it's probably quarterback when you've got young guys like Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr just waiting in the wings. But for this season, I have my concerns about Riley Leonard and his accuracy and his health, which is why I've got them at number 4. It's still pretty high, but it's not as high as you probably would like when you go out in the transfer portal and spend $1 million in a quarterback. But again, this could be at the top of the list at the end of the year. Okay, opposite situation from number 5, and that's the safeties, because Xavier Watts is clearly one of the best players on the entire team and one of the best safeties in the entire country. Rod Hurd, the transfer from Northwestern, is going to be starting opposite Xavier Watts in the back end, and he is incredibly experienced. Honestly, if we had gotten to see Rod Hurd a little bit more in spring practice and we had a better sense of how he fits in with Al Golden's scheme and all that, the safeties probably could have been higher. But due to NCAA rules, Rod Hurd was not able to be a participant in practice while he was still finishing his degree at Northwestern. He's been around. He's been a part of the team. So we're going to start to see him a lot more in the summer and then in fall camp. And there's a chance that he might elevate this group a little bit higher because we know what we're getting with Xavier Watts. I really like the addition of Hurd, but until we see it on the field, I'm still just going to be like, okay, I think he's going to be an above average, solid contributor, but not ready to say that the safeties are one of the best units on the entire team. My real concern with the safeties, though, is the depth, because after Xavier Watts and Rod Hurd, who can you rely on? So Adon Schuler, he had a pretty good spring. He didn't look that great in the Sun Bowl against Oregon State. They targeted him a little bit, but hey, he's a true freshman. It's really his first real game action, so I'm not going to hold that against him. I'm just not ready to say that he's ready to be a reliable third safety until we actually see it on the field on Saturdays going up against good opponents. Luke Talich has some really exciting traits. I think he has a really bright future. He's incredibly lengthy, 6'4", had an interception in the spring game, but I still think he's got a long way to go before he's someone that you can rely on at the back end of that defense. We haven't heard a ton about Ben Minnick lately. It felt like when he first got on campus last year, once he got over the injury that kept him out for most of spring practice, he had a good summer, and then things have sort of quieted down with his development. But I don't know, maybe he'll step it up this summer and into fall camp, and he'll move up a little bit on the depth chart. And I also don't expect any of the incoming freshmen to play this season. So the good thing for Notre Dame is that they already know they have a truly elite safety in Xavier Watts. That's better than like the vast majority of college football programs out there. Anyone would be thrilled to have Xavier Watts on the team. And I think that having a guy like Xavier Watts and Rod Hurd, who's been playing football since like the Stone Age, that's all great. But safety recruiting has been a big issue in recent years. If Notre Dame had been able to land Peyton Bowen, this would be an entirely different conversation, but we all know what happened there. We all know about the other misses that Notre Dame has had at safety when it comes to high school recruiting, and I think that shows up in the depth of this room, so that is why I have the safeties at number 5. At number 6, I've got the linebackers, and I'll admit, I struggled with this one because I'm really excited about the potential of this group. Like, it could be really, really good. And I think that there's going to be some flashes out of these young guys that make you go, wow, like this linebacker unit might be one of the best units on the entire team. Jack Kaiser, the 6-year senior, his decision to come back really changed everything for the Notre Dame defense. And I think he raises the floor for this unit as a whole because he has been one of Notre Dame's most efficient defensive players over the past couple of years. If you look at his stats in 2023, he was 3rd on the team in total tackles with 62, despite the fact that he was 12th on the team, 12th on the defense in snaps, which is 354. 2022, Kaiser was 2nd on the team in tackles with 59, but he was 15th on the entire defense in snaps with 338. So when he's out there, he makes plays, and I think he's rarely going to come off the field this season. So I'm really excited to see what he can do as an every down linebacker. Outside of Kaiser, though, there's a lot of exciting but unproven players like Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliamu-Asa, Jalen Sneed, and Jane Osbury. And look, Jalen Sneed looked great in spring practice. I've talked about him a lot on this podcast and how excited I am for him and what he could do for Notre Dame this season. That is huge for this group if he can really take his game to the next level. But is he ready to take the next step and be an every down linebacker? Because we know what he can do rushing the passer. He's already shown that he can be really effective getting after the quarterback in 3rd down, obvious passing situations. Jalen Sneed is going to be an absolute weapon on defense. But what about on 1st and 2nd down? Is he going to be in the right place? Is he going to be able to just make the simple plays and just make them look easy? We haven't seen that yet. We're going to have to wait and see on that with Jalen Sneed. Drake Bowen, he's going to be entering his retro freshman season. He has an incredible work ethic. By all accounts, he's an absolute sponge when it comes to learning the scheme, watching film, all of that. But is Drake Bowen ready to lead the defense in just his 2nd year with the team as the Mike linebacker every single play? We're going to have to wait and see. Then you've got Kingston Viliamu-Asa. He might be the best linebacker recruit Notre Dame has had since Jalen Smith. But is KVA ready to be a big-time contributor as a true freshman at a position where you have to know not only what your responsibility is, but the responsibility of everyone else around you? That's a lot to ask of a true freshman. So we're going to have to wait and see. Jane Osbury. He's a guy who has a ton of potential. He can play multiple different linebacker positions. They've even got him cross-training at nickel because he's just a playmaker. But he played 21 snaps last season. So what can you ask of him? What can you expect from Jane Osbury to go from barely playing at all to being a key contributor on this defense? At times, I think this unit is going to look amazing because I'm really high on all of the guys I just mentioned. But I also think that there's going to be times when the inexperience from one or multiple of these guys is going to show, and I think it's going to cost the defense some big plays in some big spots. Again, the fact that Jack Kaiser's back and the fact that he's going to be able to get everyone in the right place, he's been with Al Golden for as long as Al Golden has been at Notre Dame, like that's great. And like I said earlier, he raises the floor of this unit. It's why I have them 6th. If Jack Kaiser was not coming back, I'd have a lot more concerns about this group. And I think in the future, the linebackers are going to be one of the best units on the entire team. But this year, in 2024, considering how inexperienced they are and how they're going to have to learn on the fly outside of Jack Kaiser, I have some concerns, and I think that is the main reason why I have them at number 6. Okay, we've got a few more positions left with a couple notable ones remaining. So could tight end you be in trouble next year at the position? Find out right after this. Today's episode is also brought to you by Yahoo Finance. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now, you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and the data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor at yahoofinance.com. That's the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Okay, there's 3 positions left, and I want to make something clear. Just because they are at the bottom of this list does not mean I'm saying that these units are going to suck this year. As a matter of fact, I feel pretty good about every single position group I'm going to go over, but when you rank the position groups on a specific team from best to worst, even if a position group isn't bad, there has to be a worst. There has to be a best and there has to be a worst. Even on that 2021 Georgia team that was absolutely dominant, there was a best position group and there was a worst one on that team. Same with 2020 Alabama. There was a best one and a worst one. 2019 LSU, one of the greatest teams of all time. There was a best unit and there was a worst unit. I look at this Notre Dame team and I look at 7, 8, and 9, and I actually feel pretty good about them, which makes me think that, hey, the roster as a whole is really good, but someone has to be at the bottom. So let's go to number 7 here, and I've got the wide receivers. Speaking of having to wait and see, which is what I talked about with the whole discussion about the linebackers, that's pretty much exactly how I feel about the wide receiver room because, yes, they added a bunch of really good players like Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins, Jane Harrison. Those are big additions in the transfer portal. Jordan Faison wasn't with the team in spring practice because he was with the lacrosse team, but he was sort of a breakout player during the second half of last season. They've got Micah Gilbert, the true freshman who came in and was making plays immediately. I feel like this group is vastly improved than where they've been the past couple of years. They were dead last definitively, no doubt, in 2023 and 2022. So moving from 9th to 7th is an improvement. But I'm still in wait-and-see mode because I don't think this group has a clear wide receiver number 1. They have not had a clear wide receiver number 1 since Chase Claypool back in 2019. Now, if Jane Thomas and Jane Greathouse are able to stay healthy this season, which they were not able to do last year, they both could have huge seasons. I would not be shocked if Jane Greathouse asserts himself as wide receiver 1 this year. I think he can play every single wide receiver position. He could play in the slot. He could play in the field. He could play the boundary, even though that is the one probably least suited to his skill set and his size. But I'm really excited about what Jaden Greathouse can do for Notre Dame. I think my hesitancy has to do with the fact that they've just been so bad in recent years that I'm not ready to say, oh, they're definitively going to be better than the linebackers or the quarterbacks or any of the positions I mentioned in segment 2. So there's a lot of depth in this room. And I think that you can look at different players and be like, oh, Chris Mitchell, he could be a really good deep threat. Is he going to be good in short yardage passing situations? On a 3rd and short, are you going to be able to go to Chris Mitchell? I don't know. He was a really good receiver at FIU, but is he going to be able to do that going up against some of the best defenses on Notre Dame's schedule this year? We're going to have to wait and see. So I feel really good about the receiver unit being better than the past 2 years, but the reason I have them a little bit lower is because of the lack of clear elite guys. It's a bunch of guys who I think are going to be ready to contribute, and it's going to be on Mike Brown and Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman to figure out, okay, who are the guys that really need to be on the field pretty much every play? Because it's great when you can rotate a bunch of guys, but receiver is a position where if you can get into a rhythm, you start catching a couple passes, it really does a lot to your confidence, and I think you could really just elevate your play in that game specifically. I think over the course of the summer and into fall camp, guys are going to carve out their roles. They're going to figure out, okay, we need a big play here. We need to go deep to this guy, or we need someone to make a play after the catch. We're going to go to this guy. Like that could be Jordan Faison. That is still going to be determined over the course of these next couple of months, and I think that the ceiling for this group is a lot higher than it's been in a really long time. But I'll admit, when you look at what Notre Dame has produced at the position the last couple of years, and you think about the fact that they lost Chris Irie, there's reasons to be concerned about how consistent this group can be on a game-to-game basis, especially when you go up against teams with better defensive backs. Again, I feel a lot better about this group than I have in recent years. It's why they're 7th, but still, I'm not ready to put them higher and really go all in on this unit being a big strength of the team this year until we actually see it play out on Saturdays. All right, at number 8, I've got the tight ends, and it almost feels dirty to say because I'll go to war with anyone who thinks that Notre Dame does not deserve the title of tight end U. But this has everything to do with the health of that unit. If Mitchell Evans did not tear his ACL in the Pittsburgh game last season, they would be much higher because Mitchell Evans was an absolute revelation last season. He came out of nowhere. He led the team in receptions with 29, which is probably not good that your receptions leader only had 29 catches last season, but he did. And he missed the last several games of the year. He also had 422 yards receiving. In that game against Ohio State, he was Notre Dame's best receiving threat. He had one of the best catches in the entire year with that one-handed grab. And if he's back and if he's healthy for the entirety of the season, he's going to have a really good year and probably get drafted pretty high in next year's NFL draft. But he is recovering from that torn ACL. So that has to factor into the equation. If Eli Raridon didn't already have 2 ACL tears in his career already, tight ends would probably be higher. Same with Kevin Bowman and his laundry list of serious injuries that he suffered in his college career. If the entire unit is healthy, it's a really good unit. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I'm extremely excited about Eli Raridon's potential. We know how gifted he is physically, 6'6", looks like he could play college basketball at a really high level. And even though he was not a full participant in every practice throughout the spring, he looked healthy in the spring game, and that's really, really encouraging because if you have Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridon both healthy and both able to make plays like that, even though Notre Dame isn't going to run as much 12 personnel with Mike Denbrock as the offensive coordinator, having 2 really solid receiving threats at the tight end position creates mismatch problems for defenses all the time, and it's really just something that Mike Denbrock could play with in all sorts of different ways, even if they're splitting out into the slot and things like that. Cooper Flanagan, who right now is probably the 3rd tight end, unless Kevin Bauman gets healthy and he jumps him just because he's older, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I feel really good about Cooper Flanagan. He's another guy who looks ready to step up, and if Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridon deal with some setbacks with their injuries, I feel good about Cooper Flanagan coming in and being a solid second option. I don't think he's ready to be the next great tight end just yet. Maybe that'll change down the line, but he has the look of one of your more traditionally solid Notre Dame tight ends, so I feel good about him. Jack Larson, the true freshman, he's undersized for a typical Notre Dame tight end. He's a great receiving threat, but I don't think he's going to see the field much as a true freshman. I think he's an obvious candidate to redshirt this season. So when you look at the room as a whole, there's a ton of depth. There's a ton of depth considering how many guys are capable of making plays, but there also are some real concerns about the depth when it comes to the injuries. Personally, I wish they went after Ben Urasek, the Stanford transfer in the transfer portal, but they did not. Urasek ended up at Georgia, and now this group has to do everything they can to get healthy and then stay healthy. Otherwise, things could get rough pretty quickly, which is why I have them at number 8, even though I will admit that this might look really dumb at the end of the year if Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridon stay healthy and they have the type of seasons that I think and feel pretty confident that they're capable of. All right, the last one, coming in at number 9, it's the offensive line. This isn't a surprise if you've listened to me at all the offseason. They return one guy who started every game last season in Pat Coogan, and there is a chance that Pat Coogan might not even start this year if Rocco Spindler ends up beating him out. Now, Rocco Spindler started for the bulk of the games at the right guard spot last year before he suffered an injury. Billy Schrouth had to come in. So it's not like none of these guys have started. They've just started a minimal amount of games. And you look at Rocco Spindler, Billy Schrouth, Ashton Craig even came in there for a few games at the end. And once Zeke Correll went out with an injury, and then Ashton Craig just kind of beat him out, and the coaching staff was like, all right, Zeke, probably best to transfer because Ashton Craig is the center of our future. The tackles are a major concern. We've gone over this before. Charles Jagasaw, Tosh Baker, and Emil Wagner are not CFP caliber tackles at this point in time. Could they be? I definitely think that Charles Jagasaw will be in a couple years, but his redshirt freshman season, starting at left tackle, arguably the second most important position on the entire team, I don't feel super confident about that, especially when you consider the fact that he was actually playing guard throughout much of last season before Joe Alt decided to opt out of the bowl game, and then Jagasaw moved from guard to left tackle because the only experience that Charles Jagasaw got during the regular season last year was at guard in the Stanford game. So I feel good about Jagasaw's future. I don't feel that good about him this season being a really, really good player. Tosh Baker and Emil Wagner, I think that position battle to start at right tackle is going to go on. It's going to go through fall camp. And even though Tosh Baker was the starter throughout spring practice, I actually think Emil Wagner is eventually going to beat him out, despite the fact that he doesn't weigh as much as you would want in a tackle traditionally. So when I look at this unit as a whole, I feel pretty good about the interior of the offensive line with Ashton Craig and Billy Schrauth. I think Billy Schrauth, of any guy in this unit who has the potential to break out this year, it's Schrauth. Pat Coogan, I think, was actually underrated last year. So I feel good about the interior, but when your tackles are struggling, the entire unit looks bad. Think back to 2021 and how much the offensive line, specifically the tackles, hurt an offense that had Kyron Williams, Kevin Austin, and Jack Cohn. Like, they couldn't really do anything at the start of the year. Now, obviously, Caden Madden was not the player that we thought he was. Andrew Krasavich probably wasn't ready for the spotlight right there. They had Jarrett Patterson at center, though, who was really, really good. We know that. They just dealt with a bunch of different issues, and it really put the offense behind the eight ball there for a little bit, and they were not able to get things going until the second half of the year. They finally figured out how to make the most of that unit. You know, Joe Alt coming in was huge, obviously. He wasn't the Joe Alt that we know now as the top 5 pick, but he really steadied that unit, helped calm things down. Tommy Reese in the Notre Dame offense shifted and get going much faster pace, short pass, get on the ball. Don't give the defense time to rush the passer. That seemed to work out a lot, and I feel like with Mike Denbrock, he's going to be able to adjust and try to make up for the lack of experience and the lack of talent on the starting unit on the offensive line this year. But still, when you think about Notre Dame and what they want to do, this is an offensive and defensive line-driven program. And as I said at the beginning, I think the defensive line is the best unit on the entire team. So they're holding up their end of the bargain. Right now, I'm not sure if the offensive line is prepared to do the same, which is why I have them at 9th. Again, does this mean that they're going to be god-awful and they're going to hold the team back from achieving all their goals? No, I don't think that. But when you got to rank the position groups from best to worst, someone's going to have to be last. And I think that the offensive line in this case makes the most sense to be last. And I would absolutely love it if they prove me wrong, and then we do this exercise again in the offseason. We think back to, wow, Tyler, you were such an idiot. You thought the offensive line was going to be the worst unit on the entire team. Look at how they stepped up. Look at how they changed the course of the season for Notre Dame. Look at how much better the offense was able to run because this unit was not what you thought they'd be. I would love it. That would be awesome, right? If the offensive line is able to step it up and take their game to a whole nother level that I don't think they can, and a lot of other people who cover this team don't think they're going to be capable of doing this year, Notre Dame's going to have a really, really great season. But when you look at this list again, and I'll go through the top, I've got the defensive line is the best unit on the team, cornerbacks at number 2, running back at 3, quarterback at 4, safety at 5, linebacker at 6, wide receiver at 7, tight end at 8, and offensive line at 9. I think that says a lot more positive things about the roster as a whole than negative. When you think that tight ends is 8, and they have Mitchell Evans, who I think is going to be an NFL draft pick next year, it says a lot about how talented this team is as a whole from top to bottom. But hey, it's late May. Every team is going to have some concerns. I think with me, my concerns mostly have to do with the offensive line, injury problems at tight end, and just a bad recent history at the wide receiver position, which is why I have them at the end. But really excited about the defensive line, the cornerbacks. I think Notre Dame is going to have a top 5 defense in the country. They very well could have one of the best defenses in the entire country. So this is how I've got the list right now. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you agree or disagree, you think I'm wrong about a certain position group, let me know. I'm all here for it. But that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. I'll have a new episode out every morning the rest of the week, I promise, including a mailbag on Friday. So get your questions in if you got them. I haven't done a mailbag in a few weeks. I want to bring it back this week. As always, you can drop them in the YouTube comments below. You could send them in on Twitter at LockedOnIrish, or you could send them on Instagram at LockedOnIrishPod. Also, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. I'll see you guys tomorrow.